It started, as so many terrible things do, with a gesture that was meant to seem kind. "Geez, I made you coffee today. Drink up. It's the good stuff." Marcus's voice was a light, airy thing, a stark contrast to the heavy silence that usually filled our small apartment in the mornings. I was half asleep, my eyes glued to the blue glow of my laptop screen, trying to force my brain to process the lines of code that swam before me. I mumbled a thank you without looking up, my hand reaching out automatically for the familiar weight of the white ceramic mug. The first sip was a shock. It was sweet, not just a little sweet, but cloyingly, sickeningly sweet, beneath the aggressive sugar. There was a strange, almost medicinal bitterness, a chemical tang that coated the back of my tongue. I grimaced. "You dumped the whole sugar bowl in here." "Man," I grumbled, pushing the mug an inch away. From the corner of my eye, I saw Marcus just shrug, a lazy, unconcerned gesture. He turned back to his own breakfast, a small, knowing smile playing on his lips. "Just trying to be nice. You look like you need the energy." I should have known then. I should have seen the lie coiled behind his eyes, the way his smile never quite seemed genuine. Marcus and I had been roommates for 2 years, friends for 5, but our friendship had always been a thing of sharp edges and unspoken resentments. We were bound together more by cheap rent and a shared history than by any real affection. Still, I never imagined he was capable of this. I was a creature of habit. My mornings were a ritual wake-up. Stumble to the kitchen, brew a pot of black, brutally strong coffee, and sit at the laptop until the caffeine kicked in. I drank it black, always. The bitterness was the point. It was a jolt to the system, a slap in the face that said, "Wake up, the day is here, deal with it." So when Marcus started making the coffee, I should have been suspicious. But he was clever. He'd do it on the mornings I was running late, or when I was deep into a freelance project, my mind already 1,000 miles away. He'd place the mug by my elbow with that same light, feigned casualness. "Got you, buddy," he'd say, and I, absorbed and distracted, would just murmur my thanks and drink. The sweetness never went away, but I got used to it. I started to think of it as one of Marcus's many irritating quirks, like leaving his wet towels on the floor or playing his music too loud. I'd complain. He'd shrug. And the next day, another sweet, chemically tinged coffee would appear. My own laziness was a great accomplice to his cruelty. It was easier to drink the coffee he made than to argue or get up and make my own. It was a small daily surrender, and I had no idea what it was costing me. This went on for 3 weeks, 21 days of routine, of code, of takeout dinners, and the low hum of the city outside our window, and 21 cups of coffee, each one a dose of poison disguised as a favor, each one silently, methodically, rewriting the very fabric of my being. I was asleep at the wheel of my own body, coasting along while a stranger took control, and I didn't even feel the turn. Looking back, the signs were there, subtle at first, like whispers in a language I didn't understand. I was more tired than usual, a deep, bone-weary exhaustion that no amount of sleep could fix. My focus, usually razor-sharp when I was coding, began to drift. I'd find myself staring out the window, lost in daydreams, my mind feeling soft and fuzzy where it had once been precise and logical. I chalked it up to burnout. I was working too hard. I told myself I needed a vacation. I needed more exercise. I made excuses for everything, building a neat little wall of denial around myself, because the truth was too strange, too impossible to even contemplate. The truth was that my body was staging a quiet rebellion, and I was the last to know. The war had started, and I hadn't even realized I was the battlefield. The first crack in my denial came from the most unexpected of places, a mindless action movie. It was a Friday night, and Marcus was out. I was sprawled on the couch with a pizza, watching some blockbuster about explosions and car chases. The plot was paper thin, the dialogue laughable, but it was perfect background noise. Then came the scene. The hero's loyal dog, left behind during a mission, waits for him at a train station for 20 years. It was a cheap, manipulative shot at the audience's heartstrings. And it worked. A lump formed in my throat, thick and hard to swallow. My eyes burned. Before I could understand what was happening, hot tears were streaming down my face, dripping onto my shirt. I wasn't just misty-eyed. I was full-on crying, a quiet, shoulder-shaking sob for a fictional dog. I wiped angrily at my eyes with the back of my hand, my breath hitching. What the hell is wrong with me, I thought. My face flushed with a confusing mix of sadness and shame. It's a stupid movie. I'm just tired. I'm sleep-deprived. Another excuse. Another brick in the wall. But the physical changes were harder to ignore. They were insistent, undeniable. It started with my chest. A dull ache settled in behind my nipples. A persistent, tender soreness. At first, I thought I'd pulled a muscle at the gym, but the pain wasn't in the muscle, it was right on the surface. Lying on my stomach in bed became an exercise in careful positioning, trying to avoid putting any pressure on the sensitive spots. If I brushed against a doorway by accident, a sharp electric sting would shoot through me. Then, my skin began to change. I noticed it while shaving. My usual razor, the one I'd used for years, seemed to glide over my cheeks with an almost frictionless ease. The rough, familiar terrain of my face had been smoothed over. I leaned closer to the mirror, running my fingertips over my jaw. The skin was soft, pliant, with a fineness to the pores I'd never seen before. My hands, too. The calluses I'd earned from years of lifting weights were fading, the skin on my knuckles losing its rugged texture. It was as if my entire body was being subtly, meticulously resurfaced. The gym became a place of dread. The 10-pound dumbbells that had once been a warm-up now felt impossibly heavy, my arms trembling with the effort to lift them. My biceps, once hard and defined, felt soft to the touch, the solid muscle giving way to a yielding pliability. I looked at my reflection in the gym's floor-to-ceiling mirrors and saw a stranger looking back. My shoulders seemed narrower, my waistline more defined. The hard, angular lines of my body were blurring, softening at the edges. I felt a profound sense of weakness, of being a tourist in my own flesh. Each failed lift, each moment of shaky exhaustion, was another piece of my identity chipping away. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening. The ache in my chest had intensified, evolving from a dull soreness into a full, swollen tenderness. It felt full. That was the only word for it. I stood in the bathroom after a shower, the room thick with steam. I avoided looking in the mirror, as I had been doing for weeks, but I couldn't ignore the sensation any longer. With a sense of grim inevitability, I wiped the condensation from the glass and forced myself to look. And then I saw it. It wasn't fat. It wasn't the man boobs I'd seen on overweight guys at the pool. This was different. Beneath my skin, two small, distinct mounds had formed. They were round, perfectly shaped, with nipples that were larger, darker, and more prominent than they had been before. They were, without a shadow of a doubt, breasts, small, but undeniably breasts. "No," I whispered, the sound swallowed by the small tiled room. "No, it's not possible." My hand, trembling, rose to touch one of them. The skin was incredibly sensitive. The flesh beneath was firm but yielding, an elastic softness that was utterly alien. It felt like a woman's breast. I pressed gently, and a sharp, aching pain radiated from the center. I snatched my hand back as if I'd been burned. Panic, cold and absolute, seized me. My heart hammered against my ribs. My breath came in ragged, shallow gasps. I leaned against the cool tile of the wall, my legs feeling weak. This wasn't in my head. This wasn't burnout or lack of sleep. This was real. My body was betraying me in the most fundamental way imaginable. That night, sleep was impossible. I sat in the dark, the glow of my laptop illuminating my pale, terrified face. I started typing, my fingers clumsy on the keyboard. My first search was vague, hopeful, sudden chest pain in men. The results were all about heart attacks and pulled muscles. Nothing fit. I tried again, more specific male breast growth and tenderness. The term that came up was gynecomastia. I clung to it, a life raft in a sea of confusion. It could be a hormonal imbalance. It said a side effect of medication, liver problems. It was treatable, reversible. But a deeper, colder fear was already taking root. I thought about the coffee, the cloying sweetness, the chemical aftertaste, the timing. It had all started about a month ago, With trembling fingers, I opened a new tab. My hands hovered over the keyboard, hesitating, as if typing the words would make them real. Finally, I typed side effects of estrogen on men. The screen filled with a checklist of my life for the past month. Breast development and tenderness, check. Softening of skin, check. Yes. Decrease in muscle mass and strength, check. Mood swings and increased emotional sensitivity. I thought of the movie, The Sudden Tears, check. Fat redistribution to hips and thighs. I looked down at my body. Had my jeans been feeling tighter, check. I read on, my horror growing with every line. It was all there, a perfect, terrifying match. Every confusing, frightening change I had been experiencing was laid out in cold, clinical text. Someone was doing this to me, and I knew who. The image of Marcus's lazy, knowing smile flashed in my mind, and the fear turned to a white-hot, sputtering rage. The rage carried me through the next morning. I didn't sleep. I sat on my bed, watching the gray light of dawn creep into the room, my mind a chaotic storm of betrayal and disbelief. Every sip of coffee, every feigned act of kindness from Marcus replayed in my head, now tainted with a sinister, horrifying new meaning. He was in the living room when I emerged, sketching in a notepad on the sofa, a picture of domestic tranquility. He hummed a tuneless melody, the morning sun casting a halo around his messy hair. The sight of his casual, unbothered posture made something in me snap. Marcus, my voice was low, raspy from lack of use. What did you put in my coffee? He didn't look up immediately. He finished a line in his drawing with meticulous care, the pencil scratching softly in the quiet room. The seconds stretched into an eternity. Then, slowly, he set the notepad and pencil down on the cushion beside him and turned to face me. He was smiling. It was a wide, genuine, utterly terrifying smile. High-dose estrogen, he said, his voice as calm and pleasant as if he were telling me the weather. Oral estradiol, to be specific. I crushed up HRT pills and mixed the powder in with the sugar. You've been taking it every morning for almost a month now. You really do love your sugar. James. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The casual confession, the complete lack of remorse, it stole the air from my lungs. The fury that had been simmering all night boiled over. I lunged at him, a raw, guttural roar tearing from my throat. I grabbed the front of his t-shirt, ready to slam him against the wall, to feel his bones crunch under my fists. But my hands had no strength. My grip, which should have been iron, was weak, my fingers fumbling against the soft cotton of his shirt. He barely even flinched. With an almost bored sigh, he swatted my hands away. The ease with which he did it was the most humiliating part. I stumbled back, my own weakness a shocking, physical manifestation of how much he had already taken from me. Why, I gasped, the single word a plea, a demand, an expression of utter bewilderment. Marcus leaned back into the sofa cushions, crossing one leg over the other. He looked at me with the detached curiosity of a scientist observing a lab rat. Elise, he said, and the name hung in the air between us, heavy with history. 5 years ago, you slept with her. You knew how I felt about her. I told you then that I'd never forgive you. I guess you thought I was just being dramatic. My mind reeled back. Elise, his college girlfriend, the one he'd been obsessed with. And yes, there had been one drunken, regrettable night between her and me after they'd had a massive fight. It was stupid, meaningless, and I had felt guilty about it for years. But this was a punishment so disproportionate, so monstrous, it defied comprehension. This is insane, I whispered, shaking my head. This is assault. I could have you arrested. You could, he agreed, nodding thoughtfully. But would you think of the questions they'd ask? The examination? Think of having to explain to a bunch of uniformed cops that your roommate has been secretly turning you into a woman because you broke his heart 5 years ago. It's messy. And besides, his eyes gleamed with a chilling, intellectual sadism. I wanted to see what would happen. A little social experiment. I wanted to watch you fall apart, to see you panic and scream as your own body betrayed you. I wanted to break the unflappable, logical James. I just stood there, mute, As hot tears, the new, traitorous tears that came so easily now streamed down my face. I wasn't just crying from rage or sadness. I was crying from a profound sense of violation, of helplessness. He had reached inside me and twisted the very core of my identity without my knowledge or consent. Marcus watched me cry. His head tilted. The smile had faded, replaced by a look of genuine analytical curiosity. "But this is the interesting part," he said, his voice soft, almost conversational. "I expected more. I thought you'd smash things. I thought you'd be on the phone with a lawyer right now. I thought you'd be a wreck of pure rage. But you're just sad. You're just crying." He leaned forward, his gaze intense. "It makes me wonder, James, maybe some part of you, deep down, actually likes it. Maybe this isn't a punishment at all. Maybe it's a gift." His words hit me harder than any punch could have. They were designed to sow chaos, to infect my panic with a seed of doubt, and God help me, in the deepest, most terrified corner of my mind, I felt that seed begin to take root. He was a monster. What he did was unforgivable, but his question hung in the air, a poisonous, terrifying, and strangely compelling whisper. What if he's right? I turned and fled to my room. Slamming the door behind me, I slid down to the floor, my back against the wood, and finally let the sobs rack my body, mourning the man I was and terrified of the person I was becoming. For 3 days, I lived in a fog of shame and confusion. I didn't leave my room. I didn't eat. I alternated between staring at my changing body in the mirror with a kind of horrified fascination and curling up in bed, wishing I could disappear. Marcus left me alone, the architect of my misery, now content to observe his creation from a distance. The estrogen was still in my system, a silent current pulling me further and further from the shore of who I used to be. The pain in my chest was the most immediate problem. It was no longer a dull ache. It was a constant, swollen, and agonizingly sensitive presence. The loose t-shirt I wore felt like sandpaper, the slightest movement sending jolts of discomfort through me. I found myself walking with my arms crossed over my chest. A subconscious, protective gesture. I needed relief. I needed something, anything, to stop the constant friction. My mind, against my will, kept returning to Marcus's cruel words. Maybe you like it. The idea was repulsive, and yet there was a sliver of morbid curiosity that I couldn't stamp out. What would it be like to accommodate this change, to lean into it, just for a moment, instead of fighting? The thought led me to his closet. He had a box tucked away on the top shelf, a shoebox filled with mementos of Elise. He called it his box of sorrows. A typically dramatic flourish. I knew with a sick certainty what I would find in there. I pulled it down, my hands trembling, and lifted the lid. Beneath a stack of old photos and letters was a small folded piece of white lace, a bra. I lifted it out. It was delicate, fragile looking, made of soft floral lace with thin, satiny straps. It felt impossibly feminine in my clumsy hands. Holding it felt like a monumental transgression. My heart was pounding, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. This was insane. This was a step into a world I didn't belong in. But the pain in my chest was real, and the curiosity was a relentless itch. Just to see, I told myself, just to feel what it's like. For the support. The lie was thin, but it was enough. I took off my t-shirt and stood before the full-length mirror on my closet door. The 2 soft mounds on my chest looked even more pronounced in the harsh light. They were a part of me now, and I hated them. I hated them, and I was about to dress them in lace. The logistics of putting on a bra were a mystery. I fumbled with the straps, trying to figure out which way was up. I eventually figured out I should put my arms through the straps first, then pull the band around my back. The clasps were a tiny, intricate puzzle. My fingers felt thick and useless as I tried to guide the hooks into the eyes. After several frustrating minutes, I heard a faint click. It was done. I straightened up and looked in the mirror, and the world tilted on its axis. The first sensation was one of pure, unadulterated relief. The soft cups of the bra enveloped my sensitive breasts. Lifting and holding them gently, the constant, chafing pain vanished, replaced by a feeling of secure, comforting support. It was like a long exhaled breath I didn't even know I'd been holding. But it was the visual that truly staggered me. The bra didn't just feel good, it looked right. It contained the new, confusing parts of my body and gave them a shape, a definition that made sense. The thin straps cut a clean line over my shoulders, making them appear less broad. The way the band cinched around my ribs created the illusion of a narrower waist. My entire torso was reproportioned, the soft curves on my chest now looking intentional, deliberate. For the first time, the reflection staring back at me didn't look like a man's body with a strange defect. It looked like something new, something coherent. My heart, which had been racing with fear, slowed to a steady, rhythmic beat. "It looks right," I whispered to my reflection, my voice cracking with an emotion I couldn't name. It wasn't happiness. Not yet. But it was a step away from horror. It was a moment of quiet, stunning recognition. That afternoon, I did something I would have considered unthinkable just a day earlier. I put on my largest, baggiest hoodie, pulled the hood up, jammed a baseball cap on my head, and drove to the biggest mall in the city. The bra Elise's bra was still on under my shirt, a secret, supportive cage against my skin. The lingerie department of the big department store was a terrifying wonderland of silk, satin, and lace. It was a world designed for women, by women, and I felt like an invader, a clumsy, oversized trespasser. I kept my head down, my face burning with shame, convinced that every person in the store was staring at me, knew my secret. I hovered near a display of plain t-shirt bras, pretending to look at a rack of pajamas nearby, my courage failing me. "Can I help you find anything?" The voice was gentle, friendly, and utterly devoid of judgment. I looked up and saw a young woman with lavender-colored hair and a small silver nose ring. She had kind eyes and a patient smile. Her name tag read Sophie. My throat went dry. Words failed me. I could only stare at her, my panic rising. She must have seen the terror in my eyes, because her smile softened. She took a half-step closer, lowering her voice slightly. "It's okay," she said softly. "You're not the first guy to come in here looking lost, buying for a girlfriend." It was an out, a lifeline she was offering me. I should have taken it. I should have mumbled yes, bought a random gift card, and fled. But something inside me, some new burgeoning part of my identity that had been awakened by the reflection in the mirror, refused. "No," I managed to stammer, my voice barely a whisper. "It's for me." My face was on fire. I couldn't meet her eyes. Sophie didn't miss a beat. Her professional, friendly demeanor didn't waver. "Okay. Great. Do you know your size?" I swallowed hard, the number feeling alien on my tongue. I think I'm a 32B. "Perfect," she said, her tone bright and efficient. "We've got lots of great options. Are you looking for something with underwire or something a little more comfortable, like a bralette or a wire-free style?" Her normalcy was a balm to my frayed nerves. She treated my request with the same mundane professionalism as if I'd asked for a pair of socks. She led me to a quieter corner of the department and pulled out a few simple, elegant styles in neutral colors, a smooth satin bra in a creamy ivory, a soft cotton one in heather gray. "The fitting rooms are just over here," she said, gesturing with her hand. "Take your time. Just let me know if you need a different size." Inside the small curtained cubicle, my hands were shaking again. This was different from trying on Elise's old bra in the privacy of my own room. This was real. This was a purchase. This was an admission. I stripped off my hoodie and t-shirt and reached for the ivory satin bra. The material was cool and smooth against my skin, 1,000 times more comfortable than the old lace. I managed the clasp on the second try, my fingers a little more practiced now. I turned to the three-way mirror and looked. The woman who had helped me had been right. It was a perfect fit. The smooth, molded cups gave me a natural, rounded shape that was almost invisible under my t-shirt. It felt even better than the first one, less like a cage and more like a second skin. And as I stood there, looking at the stranger in the mirror, a reflection that was becoming less strange and more familiar by the minute, tears filled my eyes again. But for the first time in weeks, they weren't tears of fear or shame or rage. They were tears of a quiet, fragile, an utterly overwhelming sense of relief. It was the feeling of finding a piece of yourself you never even knew was missing. In that small, carpeted room, surrounded by mirrors, for the first time. I looked at myself and I didn't hate what I was becoming. for the first time. I thought I might be all beautiful. The experience at the mall was a turning point. It was a small act of self-care, of acknowledging the reality of my new body and treating it with kindness instead of horror. That single, simple purchase cracked open a door inside me, and in the days that followed, I found the courage to push it open a little wider. My first step was to reclaim control. What Marcus had done was a violation, an act of chemical warfare on my body. But the changes had happened. They were a part of me now. Hating them felt like hating myself. His experiment had forced me onto a path I never chose, but I realized I was the one who had to decide where it led. I found an LGBTQ+ health clinic online, one that specialized in transgender care. Making the appointment was one of the most terrifying things I'd ever done. I sat in my car in the clinic's parking lot for 20 minutes, my hand on the door handle, unable to move. What am I doing? I'm James. I'm a man. This is all a horrible mistake. But then I'd feel the soft, supportive pressure of the new bra against my skin, a silent reminder of the undeniable truth of my body. I took a deep breath and went inside. The doctor was a kind, middle-aged woman named Dr. Evans. She listened to my story without a flicker of judgment on her face. She asked questions, not about the salacious details of Marcus's betrayal, but about me. How did I feel not just physically, but emotionally? What did I want? We can start you on a course of testosterone blockers and eventually see about reversing some of the effects, she explained gently. Or, she paused, her eyes meeting mine with profound understanding. We can continue the hormone replacement therapy, but this time, it would be your choice. Medically supervised, safe, on your terms. The question hung in the air, the most important question I had ever been asked. Did I want to go back? Did I want to fight my way back to being James? A man whose body now felt like an ill-fitting suit. I thought of the stranger in the mirror, the one who looked right in a way James never had. I thought of the tears of relief in the fitting room. I was silent for a long time, the quiet hum of the clinic's air conditioning filling the room. Then, a small, hesitant smile touched my lips. I want to continue, I said, the words feeling more true, more honest than anything I had said in my entire life. But this time, I'm in control. I want to choose my own path. That decision was like a key turning in a lock. It was the moment I stopped being a victim of Marcus's cruelty and started becoming the architect of my own future. I started seeing a therapist, someone to help me unpack the trauma and navigate the complex new landscape of my identity. And I started to explore. 3 months later, the legal paperwork was approved. I stood before a judge, raised my right hand, and swore an oath. When I walked out of the courthouse, James Anderson was gone. In his place was a woman named Felicity Joy Anderson. I chose Felicity because it meant intense happiness, something I was feeling for the first time. I chose Joy as my middle name because it was a promise to myself, a promise to find joy in living as my true self. Becoming Felicity was a process of discovery, of learning a whole new way of being in the world. I became a devout student of YouTube, my laptop a gateway to a world of feminine knowledge. I watched hours of makeup tutorials, my bathroom counter slowly filling up with bottles of foundation, tubes of mascara, and palettes of eyeshadow. My first attempts were disastrous. I remember trying to do a winged eyeliner and ending up with a smudged, crooked black line that made me look like I had a black eye. I laughed until I cried, wiping it all off and starting again. Slowly, painstakingly, I learned how to blend my foundation for a smooth, natural finish. I discovered that a soft, pinkish-brown lipstick made my whole face light up. I learned that a single coat of mascara could make my eyes look bigger, more expressive. Each morning, the ritual of putting on my makeup felt less like applying a disguise and more like revealing a self that had been hidden underneath. With each brushstroke, I wasn't covering up James, I was painting Felicity into existence. Clothing was a whole new language. I packed up all of James's old clothes, the baggy jeans, the boxy t-shirts, the ill-fitting suits, and donated them. My closet was a blank canvas. I started with the basics. I learned that skinny jeans hugged the soft new curve of my hips in a way that felt amazing. I discovered the simple elegance of a silk blouse, the way the fabric flowed and draped over my chest, which had blossomed into a full 34C cup. And then came the shoes. My first pair of heels was a modest 2-inch pump. The first time I tried to walk in them, I wobbled like a newborn foal, clinging to the walls for support. but I practiced, walking back and forth in my apartment until the awkwardness faded. The heels changed my posture, forcing me to stand up straighter, to push my shoulders back. They made my legs look longer and changed the way I moved. Adding a subtle sway to my hips, they made me feel powerful. This wasn't a sudden, magical transformation. It was a slow, awkward, and sometimes hilarious journey of trial and error. There were fashion mistakes, makeup blunders, and moments of profound self-doubt, but with each small success, the first time I perfectly applied my lipstick, the first compliment I received on a new dress, the first time I walked a whole city block in heels without stumbling, my confidence grew. I was no longer a stranger in my own body. I was Felicity, and I was finally starting to feel at home. The next great wall of fear was my professional life. Coming out to myself was one thing. Coming out to my colleagues and clients was another. For weeks, I worked from home, crafting carefully worded emails, my finger hovering over the send button. I was a freelance web developer, and my reputation was everything. I was terrified that my clients would see me as unreliable, or worse, a freak. The first person I told at my main contracting firm was Donna. She was the project manager, a woman in her 50s with a sharp mind, a booming laugh, and a fiercely protective nature. She was the office mom, the one everyone went to with their problems. I invited her for coffee, my heart pounding a nervous rhythm against my ribs. I barely got the words out, Donna. There's something I need to tell you. I'm transgender. I'll be living and working as a woman from now on, and my name is Felicity. Before she reached across the table and enveloped my hands in hers. Oh, honey, she said, her eyes warm and shining. It's about damn time. We were all wondering when you were going to stop hiding that beautiful soul of yours. I stared at her, speechless. Felicity, she said, testing the name on her tongue. It's a beautiful name. It suits you. Now, what do we need to do? Change your email, update your HR file. Don't you worry about a thing. I've got your back. The sheer force of her acceptance was like a tidal wave of relief, washing away months of anxiety. True to her word, she handled everything. An email was sent out, simple and professional, announcing my name and pronoun change. The next Monday, I walked into the office for the first time as Felicity. I had spent the entire weekend agonizing over what to wear. I settled on a conservative but chic outfit, a charcoal gray pencil skirt, a crisp white silk blouse, and low black heels. My hair, which I'd been growing out for months, was now long enough to fall to my shoulders in soft waves. My makeup was subtle, professional. I felt like I was wearing armor. The moment I walked through the door, Donna was there, pulling me into a fierce hug. There she is, she boomed. Doesn't she look gorgeous? Everyone. A few colleagues clapped. Others came up to offer quiet words of support. My direct boss, a quiet man named Frank, just nodded and said, "Welcome. Felicity, glad to have you." There were no whispers, no strange looks. It was as if James had simply faded away, and Felicity had always been there. The work was the same. The deadlines were the same. The only thing that had changed was that I no longer felt like I was holding my breath. With my professional life settled, I started to allow myself to imagine a personal one. I was still deeply scarred by Marcus's betrayal, and the idea of dating, of being vulnerable with someone, was terrifying. But I was also lonely. I met Daniel at a small coffee shop near my office, the same coffee shop where I'd met Donna. I was starting to believe the place had magical properties. He was sitting at the table next to me, reading a book, his brow furrowed in concentration. He had kind eyes and a head of unruly brown curls. When I accidentally knocked my laptop charger off the table, he was the one who retrieved it for me, and our hands brushed as he passed it back. The spark was small, but it was there. He asked me about the book I was reading. I asked him about his. We talked for an hour, about books and coding and the ridiculous price of rent in the city. When he asked for my number, I gave it to him without hesitation. Our first date was a week later, then a second, and a third. Daniel was different from any man I had known before. He was gentle, a good listener, and he laughed easily. He never pushed, never pried. He seemed content to just be with me, to learn about Felicity, the woman who sat before him. He made me feel safe. By the 5th date, I knew I was falling for him. He walked me home, and as we stood on my doorstep, he took my hand. His touch was warm, firm. He leaned in and kissed me, a soft, tender kiss that left me breathless. I knew then that I had to tell him everything. He deserved to know who I was, all of me. The following weekend, we were curled up on my sofa, a movie playing forgotten on the TV. My head was on his chest, his arm wrapped around me. My heart was a frantic bird in my ribs. "Daniel," I said, my voice small, "there's something I need to tell you about myself, about my past." He muted the TV and gave me his full attention. "You can tell me anything, Felicity." I took a deep, shaky breath. My body, "It's not what you might expect. I wasn't born a woman. I'm transgender. I used to be a man." The words came out in a rush, a torrent of fear and vulnerability. I braced myself for the rejection, the confusion, the disgust. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. He gently tucked a stray strand of hair behind my ear, his touch feather-light. Then he leaned down and kissed my forehead. "Okay," he said softly. I looked up at him, confused. "Okay." "Okay," he repeated, his gaze steady and full of a warmth that melted the last of the ice around my heart. "Thank you for telling me. It doesn't change anything." He pulled me closer, his embrace tightening around me. "Felicity, when I look at you, I see the brilliant, funny, beautiful woman I'm falling in love with. That's all I see. That's all I need to know." And in the safety of his arms, I cried. Not the tears of fear or confusion or even relief I had cried before. These were tears of pure, unadulterated joy. I'd stepped out of the shadows and into the light, and I had been met not with judgment, but with love. The day I moved out of the apartment I had shared with Marcus was a cold, crisp day in late November. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue, and the air was sharp with the promise of winter. It felt like a day for endings and new beginnings. Daniel had helped me pack the last of my boxes the night before. My new apartment, a small but sunny one-bedroom closer to my office, was waiting for me. All that was left was to drop off my keys and say a final goodbye to the place that had been both my prison and my crucible. I chose my outfit for this final confrontation with care. I wore a cream-colored cashmere turtleneck sweater that was soft against my skin, a long pleated navy skirt that swirled around my ankles as I walked, and a pair of low-heeled ankle boots that made a firm, confident sound on the floorboards. My hair was styled in loose waves, and my makeup was understated but flawless. I wanted to face him not as James, his broken victim, but as Felicity, a woman who was whole and strong. He was in the living room, exactly where I had left him all those months ago, sketching on the sofa. It was as if he hadn't moved, a permanent fixture in a past I was finally leaving behind. He looked up as I entered, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, not surprise, but a kind of grudging awe. He was seeing the finished product of his experiment, and it was clearly not what he had expected. I walked to the small table by the door and placed my keys on it. The metallic clink was loud in the silent room. "I'm leaving," I said, my voice calm and even. I had rehearsed this moment in my head 1,000 times, playing out scenes of screaming and recrimination. But now that I was here, all I felt was a profound, quiet certainty. He didn't say anything, just watched me, his pencil held loosely in his hand. "I want you to know," I continued, turning to face him fully, "that I will never, ever forgive you for what you did. You violated me in the most profound way a person can be violated. You took away my choices, my identity, my safety. What you did was monstrous." I let the words hang in the air, letting their full weight settle between us. His smug smile was gone, replaced by a sullen, defensive expression. "But, I said, and my voice softened slightly. "I also need to thank you, not for your cruelty, but for its outcome. Your disgusting, hateful act was the catalyst that pushed me out of a cage I didn't even know I was in. I was living a half-life as James, asleep and unhappy and completely unaware of it. You forced me to wake up. You wanted to destroy me, Marcus, but you didn't. You inadvertently set me free." He just stared at me, his mouth slightly agape. For the first time since I had known him, Marcus was speechless. He, the master manipulator, the one who always had a clever, cutting remark, had no response. The experiment had gone wildly off script, and the subject had developed a consciousness he could neither understand nor control. "I'm happy now," I said, a genuine smile touching my lips. "Happier than I ever thought it was possible to be. I have a life you can't touch, a future you are not a part of, and that is my victory." Without another word, I turned and walked out the door. Not looking back, I closed it gently behind me, the final click of the latch sounding like the end of a chapter, as I walked down the familiar hallway for the last time. The crisp November wind hitting my face as I stepped outside. I felt the last of the weight of James Anderson and of Marcus's crime fall from my shoulders. I was Felicity, and I was free. Sunday morning sunlight streamed through the large window of my new apartment, painting golden stripes across the hardwood floor. The air smelled of fresh coffee and the cinnamon rolls Daniel was baking in the tiny kitchen. It was a small space, but it was mine. Every piece of furniture, every book on the shelf, every picture on the wall had been chosen by me, by Felicity. It was a home built on a foundation of joy, not just shared rent. I sat curled in an armchair by the window, wearing a pair of soft leggings and one of Daniel's oversized sweaters. It smelled like him, a comforting scent of sandalwood and clean laundry. I held a warm ceramic mug in my hands, watching him move around the kitchen. He was humming along to the radio, his curly hair a mess, a dusting of flour on his cheek. The sight filled me with a quiet, profound happiness that felt as warm and life-giving as the sun on my skin. He brought me my coffee, kissing the top of my head as he set it down on the small table beside me. "One perfect cup of coffee for my perfect girl," he said, his smile making my heart do a little flip. I picked up the mug. It was a rich, dark brew, with a splash of oat milk and a half teaspoon of sugar. It was exactly how I liked it now. The aroma was nutty and warm, with no trace of the chemical bitterness that had haunted my mornings for so long. As I took the first sip, the memory of those other coffees, the ones Marcus had made, flashed in my mind, the cloying sweetness, the poison hidden beneath. For a moment, I felt a shadow of the old fear, the old violation, but it was just that, a shadow. It had no power over me here, in this sun-drenched room, with this man who loved me for exactly who I was. Marcus had tried to unmake me, to dissolve my identity in a cup of sweetened poison. He thought he was writing my tragedy, but all he did was write the prologue to my real story. He introduced me to the woman I was always meant to be, and then I had to learn how to become her on my own. It was a brutal, painful, and terrifying beginning, but the journey it had started had led me here. It had led me to myself. I looked at Daniel, who was now expertly frosting the warm cinnamon rolls, his brow furrowed in concentration. I thought about my work, the clients who respected me, the friends like Donna who championed me. I thought about the simple pleasure of walking down the street, the sun on my face, feeling completely and utterly at home in my own skin. With a small secret smile, I whispered to myself, a silent toast to the woman in the mirror. "It turns out happiness is just a cup of coffee," I murmured, "made by the right person." I took another sip. It was sweet. And this time, there was no bitterness at all.